Good afternoon, everyone. Please join me in welcoming our webcast viewers. My name is Fred Mifflin, President of the Canadian Club of Toronto. Viewers, thank you for joining us today. We're proud of our club's track record of providing a forum for business, political, and cultural leaders to share their ideas with us and to challenge our thinking. At a time when the world is becoming increasingly inwardly focused, our Global Leaders series celebrates Canada's own business leaders who are taking bold steps both at home and abroad to create opportunity and prosperity here in Canada, like our guest speaker today, Bill Downe. But before I formally introduce Bill, let me tell you about the club's remaining events for the season. Next Thursday, June 15th, we'll host an evening event with Randy Boissonnault, Special Advisor to the Prime Minister on LGBTQ2 issues. Then on Monday, June 19th, we'll close our season as we celebrate Canada and journalism with CBC's Peter Mansbridge. To order your tickets or to learn more about the club, please visit our website at canadianclub.org. You can also join the conversation via Twitter and Instagram by following us at CDNCLUBTO or by using that hashtag. I want to express special thanks to today's event sponsors: BMO, Borden Ladner Gervais, represented by Andrew Harrison, and EY, represented by Eric Rawlinson. Thank you all for your generous support. And now our guest speaker. Given our club's 120-year history, it's not often that we get to host an organization that predates us. But in BMO terms, we are mere pups, as BMO is celebrating its 200th anniversary this year. Established in 1817, BMO became Canada's first bank and went on to play a critical role in the building of our nation, our financial systems, and the prosperity of our people. In 1818, the young bank established its first agency in New York, and at lunch I learned from Bill that BMO was the first foreign bank in the UK. So it was clear then that Canada had a global leader in the making, even though the Confederation of Canada would only happen 49 years later. Fast forward 200 years, and BMO today is one of Canada's most recognized global brands, with more than 12 million customers, 45,000 full-time employees, 1,500 branches throughout Canada and the U.S., and an international presence in 27 other major financial centres. The pace of global change can cause one's head to spin, whether it's political leadership upheaval, environmental shifts, the ominous threat of terrorism, or economic uncertainty. Unpredictability is the order of the day. And these issues all have a direct impact on economic performance. We're very pleased to have Bill Downe with us today to provide his insights on these issues as he reflects on his more than 10 years as Chief Executive Officer of BMO Financial Group, a period of dramatic economic volatility and yet tremendous growth and opportunity and success for BMO. Bill joined BMO in 1983 and throughout his career has held a variety of senior positions throughout North America, including Deputy Chair of BMO Financial Group and Chief Executive Officer of BMO Nesbitt Burns. A deeply respected business leader and member of the Order of Canada, Bill is a graduate of Laurier and the University of Toronto. He's a director of Catalyst Inc. and serves as chair of Catalyst's Canadian Advisory Board. He also serves on the board of the Business Council of Canada and has previously served on the board of the International Monetary Conference and is a past president of the Federal Reserve Board's Federal Advisory Council. Bill's charitable support is extensive and includes such well-known organizations as the United Way, St. Michael's Hospital, and the University of Toronto. Earlier this year, Bill was recognized by the Woodrow Wilson Center's Canadian Institute, receiving its prestigious Award for Corporate Citizenship. So again, if you have any questions, please fill out the Q&A cards on your tables and one of our staff will collect them. I also want you to join us for a post-event reception in the lobby to discuss today's topic immediately following the event. So, Bill, a very warm welcome. The Canadian Club of Toronto's podium is yours.
Well, thank you for that generous introduction, Fred, and good afternoon to you all. I want to thank as well my colleagues from the Bank of Montreal who are here, in particular our board chair, Rob Pritchard, and directors who were previously introduced, Ron Farmer and Darrell White. I also want to acknowledge the head table. You should know that when he learned that he would be here, David Peterson asked to prepare my remarks. And I think he would have happily delivered them as well. Perhaps another time. I'd like to begin by sharing something I came across as I gathered my thoughts for today's lunch. We meet in the midst of a nation brought to the verge of moral, political, and material ruin. Corruption dominates the ballot box, the legislatures, the Congress. The newspapers are largely subsidized or muzzled, public opinion silenced, business prostrated, homes covered with mortgages, labor impoverished, the people are demoralized. Now, this is a thought that might occur to you as you switch off Peter Mansbridge's nightly newscast or quit your own news feed, followed up perhaps by, and it's only going to get worse. Interestingly, these words are from the platform of the populists, officially known as the People's Party, which was founded in St. Louis, Missouri in 1892. This grassroots party represented the interests of farmers and other workers against the elites who controlled much of America's wealth and the politicians who were felt to be in league with them. The populists enjoyed some success in the election of 1892, but 4 years later they were eclipsed and largely absorbed by the Democratic Party. And while the populist rise and rapid fall makes for interesting reading, today it's just a footnote to history, except for one legacy that's still with us: the label we apply to movements that pit everyday people against the powerful interests they feel are conspiring against them. In that manifesto 125 years ago, what sounds so familiar, even more than the targets of complaint, is the sense of grievance. The movements we call populist today share this sense of collective resentment from people who are fed up with the established order, who feel let down by the system and excluded from opportunity. Such movements have come and gone before, and the knowledge that these original U.S. populists were quickly absorbed into the mainstream points to the single biggest risk presented by populism today: that we fail to take it seriously, dismissing it as an aberration that will soon pass. But here's the problem. The underlying causes of populism, not populism itself, pose a very real threat to our collective prosperity, and until those causes are acknowledged and understood, the threat will only grow. Even in Canada, for all the pride we take in being a more moderate and tolerant place, we're not immune to a populist expression of discontent, and we're most certainly vulnerable to echoes from our closest allies. Populism doesn't always manifest itself in the same way. We tend to associate it with reactionary views: anti-immigration, resistance to free trade, a fierce resolve to protect traditional jobs and industries. But if you think about it, in the run-up to the recent U.S. election, Bernie Sanders was leading a populist campaign from the left, and his advocacy, in fact, of trade protectionism was not all that different from President Trump's. This is the nature of populism. It doesn't align with right or left. It doesn't really discriminate between rich and poor. It's not just a rallying point for malcontents. It can be attached to diverse ideologies and agendas, from the brutal crackdown on crime we see in the Philippines to the empowerment of indigenous farmers in Bolivia. What all populist leaders share in common is the claim that they alone represent the interests of the real people against perceived elites. In the recent French election, we saw the defeat of an extreme form of xenophobic populism. But the winner was still an outsider, someone who appears to reject the old politics and represent a new and untested alternative. Similarly, the winner of the U.S. election sold himself as an outsider, a disruptor, someone who could channel the pent-up anger of millions of Americans by simply shaking things up. And even in Canada's last federal election, while the old party label still applied, victory went to a leader whose campaign slogan was real change, and who leveraged a common perception that government was becoming detached from the concerns of everyday people. This spontaneous rejection of the current order makes clear that populism itself is not the problem. We shouldn't be distracted by the actions of a leader who flouts the rules, or a sentiment aimed at convenient targets unsupported by facts, not if it diverts us from what we should really be concerned about. Populism is just the most visible symptom of deeper long-term issues that prevail just about everywhere, and that coalesce into a call for change. A large segment of the population is apprehensive about how change is being managed, whether its costs and benefits are being distributed evenly. They're uncertain where things are heading, and they're not even sure what the real problems are. They only see that change is gaining momentum, driven by the powerful forces of globalization, the accelerating digital economy, and demographic shifts, whether from migration of millions of people or the suggestion that a third of babies born since 2013 will live to be centenarians. Beneath the confusion is a deeper anxiety. It's what led a majority of Britons to shock the pundits by voting to withdraw from Europe. Seeking a tangible cause for their discontent, they decided to lay it across the channel. Meanwhile, in the U.S., that same anxiety has created a polarized political system in which consensus is thwarted at every turn by special interests, and an equally polarized society in which the impulse to preserve the status quo paralyzes efforts to take action through effective policymaking. Canada seems by comparison to be okay for now, and that in itself should be a cause for caution, because here too, both younger and older generations wonder if there will be any safety net to protect them in their later years, and if their children will struggle to find a place in a changing world. There's a suspicion that the future may not be as rewarding as we've been brought up to expect, even for people who work and save and invest and build. This is the real heart of what populism is reacting to. It's a protest not just against systems that have failed people or leaders they no longer trust to protect their interests. It reflects a basic loss of confidence that tomorrow will be better than today. One of the advantages of a long career, especially in the banking industry, is it allows you to see firsthand the many forms uncertainty can take, the factors that drive it, the barriers it creates, and most importantly, what's required to push through to the other side. I also have the good fortune of working for a bank that, as Fred said, is in its 200th year of business, and which has thrived by always looking forward to be at the center of social and economic change. Neither of these perspectives makes the issues we face today any less urgent, but they may help to frame what we should be asking as we stand at another critical crossroads, the intersection of globalization and the digitization of knowledge. Over the past 2 decades, globalization has unquestionably brought improvements in areas such as health and education, while lifting more than 1 billion people out of poverty. And the rise of the digital economy, which continues to accelerate, has not only revolutionized the world we know, but opened up whole new areas of opportunity. Still, for the benefits we can point to, it's reasonable to question how fairly these benefits are being shared. In this context, it seems to me the obvious questions are, what actions do we take? How fast can we take them? And who gets to decide what's to be done? So what I'd like to offer today is a way of framing our collective challenge, which for me comes down to two themes. First, when we examine the underlying issues that give rise to anxiety, what can we say is true? What's uncertain? And what is mere catastrophizing in populist narratives generated by people who are only looking at problems? What are the facts, and how can effective policymakers apply those facts and come up with solutions? And second, who is responsible for sorting this out? As leaders in business, the professions, in the institutions that define communities across Canada, what should we be doing to address the very real causes of discontent? Clearly, we have to listen differently to understand why people feel uneasy or left behind or fed up. And then we need to speak out, because we see nations where political leaders don't necessarily speak for the people they lead. We have to talk about the fears reflected in populism and its root causes, and any disconnects between what policymakers commit to do and what they're actually able to achieve. Most critically, we need to get off the sidelines and say what we believe about building economic resilience, competitiveness, and long-term prosperity, and then act on it. This is an ambitious agenda, but let's touch on a few points that are salient to the discontent that underlies populism. Trade, and whether it makes us vulnerable to economic risk. Immigration, which has also been portrayed as a threat. The changing nature of work, as traditional roles are eclipsed by new jobs enabled by technology. And lastly, economic growth and some specific actions we can take to continue to grow the middle class and expand their well-being. Part of the inspiration for the ground I want to cover was a great speech delivered by Governor Polos in March at Durham College. You can view it on the Bank of Canada website. The Governor took his audience through a series of episodes in Canadian history that showed that successful nation building has always required a fundamental openness to people, investment, and trade. That is, immigration, foreign capital, and international markets. His thesis was clear and persuasive. In his words, Canada fares better when we're open. And what made his arguments so strong was the evidence he drew from the historical record. One of the risks of populism is its ability to spread fear based on incomplete information. And the best but more difficult way to counter that fear is with facts. So let's drill down into my first area of focus, trade, and the global flow of goods and services. If we focus specifically on bilateral trade, which by definition should improve the standard of living for two countries, the benefits of any trading arrangement must be measured by how it has benefited both nations, by adding to GDP, and how it has benefited individual people through the lower cost of imports and higher employment. Since the year 2000, the average cost of imports to Canada has risen by just 27%. Compare that to a 39% rise in the CPI and a 52% increase in the cost of services. Lower import costs have held down inflation and made day-to-day life more affordable for many Canadians. Now let's look at employment. When the North American Free Trade Agreement came into force in January 19, we've never come close to the jobless levels of 20 years ago. And if we look at the U.S., the unemployment rate when NAFTA took effect was 6.6%. It declined over the next few years to a low of 4% in 2000. It only spiked again at the end of 2008 when the recession hit particularly hard south of the border. And with U.S. unemployment currently at 4.3%, it's difficult to argue that free trade is killing jobs. While NAFTA is a contentious topic at the moment, Canada as a trading nation benefits enormously from open borders. Current trade agreements give us access to markets representing 55% of global GDP, compared to 17% access for the Japanese and 36% access for Germany, France, Italy, and the UK together. We have about 0.5% of the world's population, yet we contribute nearly 1.5% of global GDP. The facts reinforce that the free flow of imports and exports has been good for this country, and this will continue to be true. There will always be problems to sort out with our partners, but we have to contextualize narrow issues that are magnified by media attention. If you casually observe Canada-US trade, you could be forgiven for thinking that the only things we export are dairy products and softwood lumber. Canada's dairy industry, whose supply management model has been very important to the family farm, but it's responsible for less than 0.1% of our total exports to the U.S. And softwood lumber, a source of disagreement between our countries since the 1930s, accounts for 1.3% of total exports to the U.S. and 0.4% of Canadian GDP. The amount of attention devoted to the tariffs on softwood lumber diverts our focus from where it really should be. First, the actions that Canadian companies can take and have taken to increase their U.S. production capacity. Second, the ability to pass tariffs directly through to the purchasers of Canadian lumber. And lastly, what can be done to help affected firms and their employees as the industry adjusts when new tariffs are imposed. Last week, the Canadian government responded with a financial assistance package that includes additional loans and loan guarantees for forestry products, or forestry companies rather, as well as retraining and increased insurance benefits for workers who are displaced. And Canada is right to continue diversifying our trade options, if not through multilateral agreements, which are hard to orchestrate, then in bilateral and regionally focused agreements. And at a micro level, there's plenty to do at home. The recent agreement on interprovincial trade is a big step forward in removing domestic barriers to the flow of goods and services. And we look forward to seeing restrictions removed on professions and various specialized jobs as well. If you're going to advocate for more free movement of people, you should apply the same principles at home. Which leads me to the second area I want to highlight this afternoon. Again, because much of the public discourse is not fully anchored in evidence, and that's immigration. A fact that no one disputes, or at least no one with a basic grasp of history and economics, is that a growing population is essential to maintaining economic prosperity. Where opinions differ is on how that population growth can occur and where it should come from. Canada, like most developed countries, has a relatively low birth rate. Over the past decade, 70% of our population growth has come from immigration. In the U.S., the situation is just about the same. We have to safeguard Canada's long-standing reputation as a country that welcomes newcomers, not only refugees fleeing conflict, but migrants from around the world looking to build a better life. As with trade, successive federal governments, while differing on points of policy, have recognized the importance of immigration to growing GDP. But today, what's more evident than ever is the opportunity we have not only to expand our numbers, but to deepen the national talent pool. Populist narratives encourage a misguided impulse to erect barriers against outsiders, and Canada can only benefit from its reputation for openness and tolerance. We need to continue offering a faster immigration track to international students at colleges and universities. Many of those students focus on the STEM disciplines that help drive innovation. They've shown their interest in Canada and are well on their way to being part of our community. Why not make it easier for them to stay and make a lasting contribution? We can also do more to foster the talent of newcomers who are seriously underemployed. Based on estimates in a recent study from from the Munk School of Global Affairs, making better use of their educational and management experience could inject an additional $11 billion annually into the Canadian economy. StatsCan estimates that new Canadians and their second-generation offspring, who together represented 38% of the population in 2011, could account for nearly 50% by 2036. Gaining experience in every kind of enterprise in every sector, many will launch ventures of their own. And our history is filled with examples of entrepreneurs who came from elsewhere and built successful businesses from scratch, including 2 centuries ago, 8 of the 9 founders of the Bank of Montreal. Of course, when we talk about boosting prosperity, we also have to look at how it's distributed. And that brings me to the third issue I want to highlight, the changing nature of work as we transition from old jobs to new jobs and come up against the challenge of income inequality. This is a problem that every one of us is worrying about because it contradicts our basic notions of fairness and because we really don't understand its causes or what to do about it. In several decades' worth of research exploring the complex relationship between income inequality, social development, and economic growth, a common conclusion is that growing disparities in income are characteristic of fundamentally inefficient economies. A recent study of 159 countries showed that an increase in the Gini index, a standard measure of inequality, has a worrisome correlation to slow growth. We often hear the argument that in mature economies, at least, social mobility will close the inequality gap over time. And to some degree, that appears to be the case. A study last year by the Fraser Institute found that in the decade after 1993, 88% of Canadians who had been in the bottom fifth of earners moved up at least one income level. And by 2012, nearly half of those who had started at the bottom were now in the top 2 income groups. The trend continues. When Evan Siddall, CEO of Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, spoke to this club last week, he pointed out that in terms of intergenerational mobility, that is, the likelihood that children will enjoy greater prosperity than their parents, Canada is at the top of the scale, alongside several Scandinavian countries, and ranks significantly higher than the US, the UK, and many European nations. But findings like these, however reassuring, don't adequately reflect how the world looks to people who haven't managed to secure good jobs and who don't believe opportunities will be any better for their children. And more significantly, the arithmetic of future mobility doesn't do much for the millions of people who find themselves stuck in the middle as part of an economic group that's being redefined as globalization and the digital economy transform what kind of work gets done, where, and by whom, and what work no longer needs to be performed by humans at all. It's in the middle class, in some ways more challenged by change than those with the lowest incomes, that we find deeply felt discontent. We see young people starting out well-educated and working hard, but with little economic security and a deep fear that the future might not be much better. And alongside them, well-established people in mid-career who suddenly find they've stopped advancing, or worse, are at risk of losing their jobs because they lack the skills required by a fast-moving, technology-driven economy. It's when we look more closely at how change is affecting people's lives that we realize the depth of the anxiety driving populism, with an impact that's felt both at the ballot box and in shifting social attitudes. And here I'll point to the insights being generated by the Persona Project, a research initiative of the Martin Prosperity Institute at U of T. Rather than studying social attitudes in aggregate, they're looking at the specifics of individual lives and showing how viewpoints that can seem at first glance naive or illogical may be based on premises that are quite reasonable, at least to the people living them. It's about de-averaging humanity, embracing people's unique attributes, personal biases, and legitimate worries, and as a way, rather, of finding solutions that don't gloss over differences. If you're not familiar with the Persona Project, I recommend taking a look at its granular approach to informing better collective outcomes. At the same time, if we want to give new hope to people who feel overlooked, we have to offer quality jobs with a future. Jobs that are performed better by technology will not be coming back. The more important question is, what can we offer in their place? As organizations in every sector find they have a surplus of skills in some areas and a shortage in others. You may be familiar with the good job strategy developed by Zeynep Tom of MIT, who also works at the Martin Prosperity Institute. She's shown how smart companies are cross-training employees and empowering them to make a wider range of decisions, and when this is done right, it increases both customer satisfaction and profitability. This creates more meaningful work for everyone involved, and it translates into higher wages. The challenge lies in allowing people who've been freed from routine tasks to take on more complex assignments requiring new skills. And it's here that we need to focus attention on guiding and rewarding people to help drive innovation, provide greater customer experience, and create value that didn't exist before. Which brings me to my final area of focus, how we can use education and innovation to foster economic growth, especially in support of a more vibrant and growing middle class. Obviously, training and development have a critical role to play in expanding economic opportunity, and when more than 70% of Canadian business leaders still perceive a significant gap between the skills they need and what the market offers, I know I'm preaching to the converted. At BMO, we're often challenged to fill positions requiring skills that shouldn't be difficult to attain. Last year, we invested $78 million in education, carrying on a level of investment we've sustained over decades. And as we see a high return in the caliber of talented people we're attracting and developing, we're strengthening our own organization. But the foundation for our collective efforts remains the public education system. One encouraging sign is that growth in post-secondary enrollments rose steadily from 2001 through 2014. And interestingly, the growth rate was highest at 25% among families with the lowest income. At the same time, we see comparable growth in continuing education as employees and employers alike recognize that learning never stops. Ontario's community colleges report that the number of university graduates complementing their degrees with additional programs has risen more than 40% in the last 5 years. This is where we need to invest in continuing education that responds to the needs of the labor market, not in protecting jobs that in the long run can't and shouldn't be saved. Studies of European countries show that a 1% increase in training days correlates to a 3% increase in productivity. Continuing education benefits individuals, helping them advance in the new economy, and it benefits all of Canada as we strengthen the critical thinking skills that help knowledge workers grapple with complex problems along with disciplines that spark innovative breakthroughs. Our ultimate goal is growth in GDP, which, as you know, is defined as population growth multiplied by the increase in individual productivity. Innovation as a driver of productivity has not been a strength of Canada's economy. But as renewed focus in the area becomes part of the national agenda, it's heightened expectations that companies will invest in research and development and in the use of new technologies to transform their business models. In this country, both professional and federal government has taken immediate, practical steps to provide assistance, recognizing the success of innovation hubs like Communitech in Kitchener-Waterloo and the DMZ at Ryerson. The federal government is investing in larger regional superclusters to dramatically scale up the impact of these microeconomies. And recognizing Canada's natural strengths in transforming economy, the government has identified specific sectors such as clean tech and agri-food for a dedicated fund that targets promising opportunities to both boost growth and profitability. So these kinds of initiatives are vital catalysts for innovation, but equally important is the ability of established companies to respond creatively to a fast-changing environment. When fintech first emerged and collided with the banking industry, there were dire predictions that it would be the end of the banks. Instead, that collision has been good for business. A case in point is BMO Smartfolio, which consumers, or rather customers, can use to tap into personalized investment management in just minutes. It was designed, developed, built, and launched in only 6 months, a fraction of the time it would have taken just a couple of years ago. It would not have been possible without our family of intelligent ETFs to provide a low-cost investment engine these customers need. Having a robust underlying IT platform was critical, but so too was having the experience, resources, and scale that large enterprises bring to innovation. The larger point about innovation is that it's not a single phenomenon. It's many factors working together. We need investment in new ventures, in new ways of serving customers, in R&D, and in collaborative initiatives led by government to help achieve for everyone what a single company couldn't accomplish on its own. There are many other dimensions to innovation and to all the areas of public and private policy that can be aligned to boost competitiveness. So I'll just touch on one more, and that's infrastructure. The federal government has established the Canada Infrastructure Bank, a new tool for financing projects in partnership with private sector investors. As the Canadian press reported after an interview with Minister Morneau this week, the Infrastructure Bank will look to fund projects that are too costly for governments, too risky for the private sector to cover alone, and which generate revenue to provide a return on investment to everyone who's involved. This will grow the universe of dollars available for infrastructure development, making it possible to move ahead on large, transformative projects. At the same time, private sector participation will help ensure that every initiative is supported by a sound business case. The intent of this investment is not simply to inject cash into regional economies. It will facilitate sustainable economic growth through large-scale projects that benefit the entire country. By way of example, Kevin Lynch, a Vice Chair of BMO and formerly Canada's most senior public servant, has proposed an energy transportation corridor stretching from coast to coast, which could include pipelines, electrical grids, and other forms of energy transport. Now, we all know pipelines continue to be a topic of heated debate in this country, but it's equally important to have a respectful dialogue and to reach a conclusion. I'll just note that such projects have undeniable economic benefits. There's the immediate impact of added construction jobs, along with increased demand for primary materials and heavy manufacturing. But the real impact will come as Canada is able to diversify its export markets for energy and support a more robust east-west flow of commerce within this country. This is how we should be evaluating all major infrastructure projects, whether it's airports providing Canadian companies with global connections, high-speed rail linking manufacturing and high-tech centres, or public transit serving key employment clusters. And to fully realize the potential of these projects, the great work of Sue McIsaac when she led United Way showed the value of community benefits agreements, whether through procurement from local suppliers or apprenticeships in skilled trades for at-risk youth. They ensure a fair distribution of benefits. When government tackles challenges like infrastructure, it must weigh the concerns of specific groups, some of them passionately vocal against the general good. These issues are complex. You can't create policy in 140 characters. Neither can you decide multi-layered questions by plebiscite. This is the strength of our representative democracy. We elect people to apply their collective knowledge and experience on behalf of us all, digging into details to find workable solutions. Sometimes we don't like the legislation that results, but rather than grumbling after the fact, The business community needs to recognize that governments will ultimately act in areas when no one else is coming forward with better ideas. In other words, as I said at the outset, the business sector needs to ask, if this is the program, what do we have to do to make sure it's effective? Well, we've covered a lot of ground, and I hope it's been helpful to connect some of the facts around these issues that we know really matter. Returning to the opening quote, it is not the case that we're on the verge of moral, political, or material ruin. But what exactly can we be doing to help address the social and economic challenges that have given rise to populism? It starts with acknowledging that these challenges are real, especially for those who feel caught in the middle of accelerating change and who don't see any reason to hope that their problems are going to be resolved in the medium term. The next step is to listen, engage, and take action. When a draft paper is released by the CBA or the Business Council of Canada, read it, think about it, and comment on it. That's the only way to ensure that the most important issues get elevated and the essential facts are discussed. If you've been hanging back, hoping government will take the lead, or just simply focused on your day-to-day priorities, it's time to get off the sidelines. Business leaders have an opportunity to bring clarity, reduce apprehension, and help tackle big systemic issues. We need to proactively offer our views on public policy, along with concrete proposals for improving it. And we need to follow through with action. A representative democracy requires active participation from the people it represents. The people in this room are leaders. You have the privilege of access. Use that unique privilege to influence positive change. Access is not just a perk that comes with success. It's a responsibility we all have, individually and collectively, to help close the gaps and correct the imbalances that populism points at but never resolves. And I'm hopeful that facts will win the day. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jennifer Sloan. I'm the Vice President of Public Policy at MasterCard Canada, very proud past president of the Canadian Club, and today also a very proud MasterCard team member, and very much proud and very much values our BMO MasterCard partnership. So, Mr. Downe, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jennifer. We do too.
And so on behalf of the Canadian Club, I'd like to thank you for participating in today's Global Leaders Series. Volatility and uncertainty are apt descriptors of our global environment. As you pointed out, these are defining times for our nation. Leaders can retreat, or they can seize the opportunity to display real leadership. Mr. Downe, we appreciate the leadership you have demonstrated throughout your brilliant career. Your ability to steer one of the country's most distinguished financial institutions through trying times speaks to your talent and commitment. Your corporate citizenship has left an indelible footprint in the financial services industry. Whether it was your commitment to using technology to enhance the customer experience or shifting the look of senior leadership, we thank you for your good example. Please accept our best wishes for a wonderful and rewarding retirement when it comes. And I look at Mr. White. Before we conclude, let me extend another round of thanks to today's event sponsors, BLG, BMO, Eric, and EY. Thank you very much. We'd also like to thank mediaevents.ca, Canada's online event space, and VVC for live streaming today's event. To learn more about the club, please visit us at canadianclub.org. Don't forget to join us in the ballroom lobby for our post-event reception. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our program for today. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you.